Work-life balance. It is something that everyone in every profession is always trying to achieve. And it's so hard. And I find, especially for teachers, we naturally have an altruistic nature that has us lean towards sometimes becoming martyrs. We often see this job as our calling, and that leads us to maybe blur the lines between work time and home time in ways that my sister, who's a vascular surgeon, can't. Like, yes, she can check messages and she can check charts from home, but she's not going to be operating on anyone in her home. So she can naturally have a better work-life boundary line than maybe I can or any of you listening can. And I also think too, for teachers, we have so much on our plates. Not that my sister doesn't, but for you specifically, if you're listening to this, you're a teacher. I just think it naturally can overflow into home time no matter what we do, unless we're like extremely proactive about protecting against that. So if you relate to any of these sentiments, this podcast episode is for you. We are going to talk about practically and mentally not bringing work home with you this school year. So how to actually not do it in reality, but also how to not bring work home with you mentally, like in your head, as you go through the rest of the school year. So let's dive in. This is Secondary Science Simplified, a podcast for secondary science teachers who want to engage their students and simplify their lives. I'm Rebecca Joyner from It's Not Rocket Science. As a high school science teacher turned curriculum writer, I am passionate about helping other science teachers love their jobs, serve their students, and do it all in only 40 hours a week. Are you ready to rock the time you spend in your classroom and actually have a life outside of it? You are in the right place, teacher friend. Let's get to today's episode. Every January, I send out a survey to everyone on my email list about the Secondary Science Simplified podcast. And I just kind of look to read the room and get an idea with what people are struggling with so I can decide on the episodes to do. And one of the messages I got, which really summarized what a lot of people were saying, is this idea of like, how do I not bring work home? You know, one of the messages, the specific one I'm really thinking about now is this mom of young kids who's like, I'm not staying late because I want to go pick up my kids from daycare. And then I'm having to bring work home, and then I'm having to do it after the kids go to bed, but I feel like I'm not really being that productive. And then I'm getting no time with my husband, and I never feel caught up. Like planning is never enough. And then this teacher also specifically mentioned that she has ADHD and medicine does help, but she has a really hard time with like, what do I prioritize? And just decision paralysis. So first, I obviously directed her to my episode with Brianna Plyler, which if you have ADHD, you need to listen to. I will link it in the show notes. Brianna is an ADHD life coach, and she just has such amazing advice for teachers who struggle with that. So that is a great episode specific to that. But I also just really wanted to talk about work-life balance, especially at the beginning of the school year, because I think a lot of the habits we set now can really impact how the rest of the school year will go. So before I dive into this, though, I do want to let you know, I mentioned this last week, I made a spreadsheet that organizes every podcast episode we've had so far. You can find it at bit.ly/SSS podcast episodes, and that link is in the show notes too. If you scroll, you get at the bottom, you can see all the different tabs, and one of them is work-life balance, and there are 23 episodes there, and you can see what they're all called. So you can see like, oh, I really struggle with this specifically or this, and that can help you know if you haven't listened to past episodes, what might serve you. So I wanted to make sure you knew that that was there. But obviously, we're going to talk about it now too, because that's what the episode's all about. So first, let's talk about this practically. I think one of the things we often bring home, and I know it's not the only thing, but it's grading. And I think grading is one of the things most teachers can really cut back on more. And so a few resources I want to highlight for you if you feel like in particular that grading is really hard for you, and that's what tends to be the overflow that comes home with you and that you're doing after your own children go to bed. Definitely listen to episode 189. That's True Life, I Grade Everything, and because of it, I have no life. And then episode 120 is how to cut your grading time in half. I think both of those would really serve you. And then if you just want more help overall with assessing your students, formatively, summatively, grading, labs, like tests, everything, I have virtual professional development courses. And I have one all about assessment. So I'm going to link it in the show notes. And if you're like, I don't know about a virtual professional development course, I have a free one that all you have to do is give me your email so that then I can email you the Google Drive link and you can try it. And if you like the format and like the teaching, then you can decide if you're like, I would like to pay for help on assessments. But it's called Labs When Limited, and it's for anyone who feels limited by labs in any capacity. So I'll link that in the show notes too. But those are some resources that might help you. Now, what else? Here's what I want to tell you. First, be extremely ruthless about what you grade so that when you're grading, you can actually grade it well and not be constantly swamped with things that you have to grade. Like you should not just be having a backlog on your desk. Okay, one really practical way I do this is with my prime times. That's what I call my daily bell ringer. I think the first 5 minutes of the class period are the most important minutes of the day. They set the entire tone for the culture of my classroom. It's a huge part of my classroom culture, but it's also a cornerstone of my assessment strategy. I grade those for accuracy every single day, and they're only 5 points and they're open note. So it feels like very low risk for students, or low stakes, I should say. But at the same time, it's extremely informative for me because it helps me make sure I'm actually laying eyes on work that students are doing daily while not having to bring a bunch of stuff home. And then on top of that, I only collect one thing per week per prep. Okay, so one lab or one test, that's it. And then anything else, I would be spot checking and going over for completion. Y'all, they're called formative assessments for a reason. I don't know why we feel like we have to grade every single thing. So I highly recommend that. I also recommend changing the culture of your classroom. Like if you're like, well, my students don't do anything unless I grade it. Okay, that's a classroom culture problem. We don't do work for a grade. We do work to learn. And your students will learn based on the type of work you're giving them, whether or not it's busy work or actually good in helping them learn what they need to learn. And so I think that is a class culture DNA problem that we need to fix and retrain them. Like I never told my students what I was going to be collecting and what I was not collecting because their effort level shouldn't be motivated by whether or not they're getting an accuracy grade or a completion grade or no grade. Like we're going to be doing all the things with our best effort. And that does require, to change your culture, it requires you to really be on them, to stalk them, if you will, to constantly be monitoring them. This isn't like, okay, you all go off and work on this and I'm going to sit on my desk and catch up on grading a bunch of other stuff. Like, no, I'm going to be taking laps. I'm going to be listening with my supersonic hearing to hear if you're getting off topic and making sure you're actually doing the work. So that's a classroom culture thing. I also think something that can really help here with not bringing work home is outsourcing other things, outsourcing what you can outsource, Yes, you can do peer grading to help with grading, but I do feel like grading is one of those things that the teacher really needs to do unless you're doing a peer grade type of thing. But you can outsource curriculum design. You can outsource making copies. A student teacher's aide could do that for you in seconds. I will link a blog post all about teacher's aides and why they're the best thing ever. A National Honor Society student who needs volunteer hours can come in your classroom for 30 minutes every week or an hour every week and make your copies for you. Okay? Episode 69 also has all these different ways that your admin can support you and how to ask for the support and when to ask. You need to ask for help, okay? You cannot be a one-person show here. Okay, this is a group project, raising these young learners. Okay, so that really helps with the overflow too. Another thing I'll say is you have to stop working harder than your students. Episode 123 is what to do when you care more than your students, and that gives you some really practical ways to kind of make sure that you're not doing more work to see their success than they are. And I know that can be controversial and a lot of people think that they should, and that's okay. We're allowed to have different opinions, but I feel pretty strongly about that one. And then the last thing I'll say that I think is really a practical hack is scheduling in an overflow day. Okay, so this is one day a week that you're going to stay late, and that's going to serve as your catch-up day. So that if you're not getting everything you need done in your planning period, which is likely, then this becomes the day that you catch up on everything and you're going to stay until you're caught up. And that's going to be the day that okay, this is the day that you're, if you have little kids, like the teacher who put in the original submission, your spouse is going to pick them up from daycare that day. That's going to be the one day that you don't get to do it. They're going to put them to bed. They're going to make chicken nuggets for the kids and you're going to grab takeout for you and your partner. And that's going to be the day you catch up. And you're going to build that in so you don't feel guilty. And then let's say it's Thursdays. When I was in the classroom, it was Thursday afternoons. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, you don't feel bad when you're leaving at 3:45 or at 4 or at 4:30 because you're like, I'm going to stay late on Thursday and catch up on all the things. I think establishing that set time, that's your overflow time, is really, really helpful. Right now in my life, it's Friday afternoons because I work when my kids are all in school, which because I still have one child that's 3, I only have 3 mornings that are preschool mornings. And then I have quiet times or nap times for 2 hours Monday through Friday. So I try to never plan to work on Friday so that if I'm not finishing something or if I need overflow, that's a 2-hour window that I can overflow into if needed. And then if there's a day that you don't have to overflow or a week you're not overflowing, it feels so special. It's like a bonus vacation day. Okay, so that's to get really, really practical. A few other things, but again, I don't want to like over talk about stuff I've talked so much about. So I think checking out that bit.ly/SSS podcast episodes spreadsheet is really helpful in going to work-life balance. But like, I think a lot of time gets wasted during people's planning periods. So I'm going to link an episode all about productive planning periods. And that includes, not checking your email like 5 times a day, because that's such a time suck. And you get in these back and forths with people that waste a lot of time. You can reclaim a lot of time by not doing that. So many ideas. So outsourcing and having those boundaries, really helpful. But that overflow day, I think, is the most helpful. Okay, now let's talk about mentally. Because you might be thinking, even if I do all that, Rebecca, I'm still going to feel burdened, like I'm not doing enough. A few thoughts for you if that's you. Again, set up literal boundaries and hold the line. Okay, I think having rules really helps me. And you might need to write these down and print them off or write them on a sticky note and put it on your computer. Things like, I'm not going to check email after work hours. I'm not going to bring my work bag into my house. I love to leave my work computer at work, but I had schools that wouldn't let me do that. So, okay, I would just like bring it and lock it in my car in my garage, So I think having rules really help. So write out some rules for you. I think another practical thing is that anxiety begs action. So if you're feeling anxious about all the things you have to do, then make a list. Before you leave the classroom, make a list of what you need to do as soon as you get in the next morning. And stick it to your desk for right when you sit down so you know like, okay, in chronological order, this is what I need to tackle when I get in here in the morning. I think as best as you can, have everything else for the next day set up already. Like go ahead and prep the lab if you can. Go ahead and have all the copies done. Have everything ready so that when you show up the next day, it's like, okay, I'm just tackling this bulleted list now. And then another thing I want to kind of mention, it's a little bit different from things I normally talk about, but it's some mindset coaching. I sat under some teaching from a life coach who was trained by the Life Coach School about the CTFAR method, and I found it really interesting. And the CTFAR method is this concept that C stands for circumstances. So circumstances are facts, and those trigger the T, which are your thoughts. Your thoughts then produce the F, which are your feelings. Your feelings generate A, your actions, and then your actions cause R, the results. So if you are feeling anxious about your workload, we have to work backwards. I think often we take our feelings and then we try to make actions from them to change our feelings, but it's actually the other way around. We need to change our thoughts because that's going to change how we feel. And so that's where I think having some thoughts or refrains that you can recite to yourself of like, I am a good teacher. I am doing the best that I can in my current capacity in the season that I have, or teaching is my job. It is not my life. Like having different thoughts you can think so that when things happen, you can remind yourself of what is true, tell yourself the truth in those thoughts, and then hopefully that can help too with those feelings of anxiety about not doing enough. Because I guarantee most likely most of you are doing so much. You're doing plenty. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably doing way more than the average teacher. And I just want to encourage you too with this. Rewiring how you think and thus how you feel about something does take time. But this is why setting boundaries and then having people in your life who help you hold those boundaries is really, really key. And that's why that's going to be your take-home challenge I want to give you today, is set some rules to serve as boundaries for how you're going to do this job this year. Okay, so maybe it looks like I'm not going to check email outside of work hours. I'm not going to bring things home to grade. I'm going to set a timer to find the resources that I need to teach this topic. And then whatever I find at this, when the timer goes off, is what I'm going to use, even if it's not perfect. And I have time in the future to change it. Maybe the rules are like, I'm going to ask for some help. from admin. And there's a ton of things linked in the show notes for how you can do that. I also want to encourage you to set your work time hours. Like maybe your school day is 8 to 3. And so maybe your work hours are, I'm going to get in at 7:30 and then I'm going to stay until 4 or 4:30. Okay. So you're going to give yourself 30 minutes on the front end, an hour and a half on the back end, and then you're leaving. I would say probably 7:30 to 4 feels reasonable to me. And then there's going to be one day a week that maybe you're going to stay till 5:30 as that overflow day. Maybe you don't always need it. Maybe sometimes you do, but that's going to be your overflow day. And then you're not going to feel guilty on Sunday that you're not working. You're not going to be feeling guilty Thursday if you pick, let's say you pick Monday's your overflow day. You're not going to feel guilty Thursday as you're sitting at your son's middle school football game that you should be grading stuff in the stands, okay? We're not going to do that anymore. So set your overflow day. I think that's really helpful. I talk about this a lot in my Balance virtual PD course, so I'll link that in the show notes too. And then pick a few people that can help hold you accountable. Like I said in last week's episode, my husband has been really helpful for this because he's very good at modeling work to live, don't live to work. And so he helps me. You know, maybe it could be your best friend. Maybe it's your roommate. Maybe it's a co-teacher. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a neighbor. I don't know who it is, but I think having someone who loves you and wants what's best for you as a human being, not just for you as a teacher to be successful, I think is really important. So I want to encourage you to do that. And if you want to check out any of those supplemental resources and episodes I mentioned, you can find them in the show notes at itsatRocketScienceClassroom.com/episode 199. And I would love it if you haven't left a rating and a review for the podcast, if you would do it. It means so much to me, especially if this episode helped you feel a little bit more hopeful about having work-life balance this year and not bringing work home. All right, teacher friends, that wraps up today's episode. If you're looking for an easy way to start simplifying your life as a secondary science teacher, head to itsnotrocketscienceclassroom.com/challenge to grab your classroom reset challenge. And guess what? It's totally free. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you here next week. Until then, I'll be rooting for you, teacher friend.